and welcome to Bring It On, your Whitman-Hanson Cable Network channel. My name is Bob Hayes, and I'm going to be your host today. Today I have a couple of guests, and we're hoping to answer some questions for the public that they have about MSBA, which is the Mass School Building Assistance Program. And I'm very pleased to have with me today Jack McCarthy, who's the Executive Director of MSBA. Jack, how are you?
Thanks for having me.
Hey, thanks for coming. And we also have the Superintendent of Schools, Ruth Gilbert Whitner. Ruth, thank you for coming. I see you more often than I see Jack, obviously, but it's good to see him, and it's good to be able to maybe come forward and answer some of these questions. Jack, I guess to jump right into the beginning of it, what is MSBA? People hear this term, and we say it very lightly because we're so used to it, but can you give us a little background?
Sure. The Mass School Building Authority was created in 2004. It's a quasi-independent state authority. We're governed by a board of directors. The chairman of the board is Treasurer Steve Grossman, and the rest of my board are professionals. I have professionals in education. I have one of the most world-renowned architects you'll find in the city of Boston on it. I have the former Inspector General on my board, and I have someone from A&F, the people that put together the state budget, as well as someone from the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. So the board comes with a wealth of experience that is totally relatable to the mission of the MSBA.
So you would say that, as you mentioned a moment ago, a quasi group of professionals that come and they sit and they look at projects. And the MSBA's mission is to build school districts. Is that correct?
Yeah, our mission statement is simply to partner with Massachusetts communities to promote the design and construction of educationally appropriate, flexible, sustainable, and cost-effective public school facilities. And I think we more than reach that goal every time. As I said, we were created in 2004. And we were created because the school building program had gone way out of control. People were building these huge buildings, and you found yourself with so much excess capacity, and it was unaffordable for the state to continue it that way. So they created the School Building Authority. Our statute is very prescriptive for how we do reimbursements, how we determine projects, and how we operate. So it's very tightly controlled by the legislature. And I think it has resulted in, more right-sized schools, I think more cost-effective schools, and I think we have great educational systems that we have in these schools. Okay, so
that gives us kind of an idea, a very good idea of what MSBA's mission is and what they do, but how are you funded? A lot of people have said that, when you talk about tax dollars and you get out on the street with the average individual that doesn't do this every day and doesn't do what Ruth does in education, it sometimes gets lost in the shuffle of what the mission is and how it's funded, and people get a little confused with that. Can you touch on that a little bit?
We have a steady source of revenue. We have 1 penny of the sales tax, so the sales tax is 6.25%. 1 penny of that comes to us. This year, that's about $728 million. Next year, we estimate that it's going to be $771 million. So we get that automatically. It comes right off the top from DOR when they collect it. It goes into our smart fund, they call it, and the legislature can't touch it. It comes to us. It's a guarantee that we get it.
So it's a definite, because as you say guarantee, it brings me to another point and another question that comes up quite frequently. This is a guaranteed funding source. So when a project, because this is a question that I've had some citizens of the town ask me, what is the guarantee that MSBA, because the school district has to bond for the whole $58 million in the state of, we'll say, what's going on in the Whitman-Hanson Regional School District. If there happens to be an elementary school built, we have to go out and create a bond for $58 million. How is the guarantee, once this project's in the pipeline, that the state is going to come up, because that's been asked.
Yeah,
the state's going to come up with the $29 million.
Yeah, we actually sign a contract with you. We call it a project funding agreement. And we're very careful on how many projects we put in, because we will not allow a project to come in unless we have the money to do that whole project. And so we sign an agreement with you that says we will pay you this amount. And you have to have a vote that appropriates the entire thing, but when you go to borrow, you won't be borrowing the entire thing. And there's a couple of reasons for that. Probably the biggest reason, and one of the biggest differences between what the MSBA does now and what the old program used to do, is we'll pay you as you go. So within 15 days of getting all the paperwork that proves your payment to your vendors, you're getting a check from the MSBA. So that really cuts down on the amount of funds that you'll have to borrow, which obviously would cut down on the interest you have to pay.
It saves the town money.
Right.
It's a much, much more credible way of doing it. But I think part of the issue in the contract piece is a large piece, because as we move through this project, and it's a little bit different than the high school project that Whitman-Hanson did together, because as you said, the sources have changed, that the funding is guaranteed. We have a contract with the state, a 100% bulletproof guaranteed contract from the state. As you mentioned earlier, there's $771 million or something in the pipeline, and you bring your projects to that number and you stay within that number. Yeah. Is that correct?
That is correct. And one of the things that our statute forces us to do is we have a cap every year of what we can spend. And so that limits the number of projects we can do, obviously. Yeah. But it really puts a finite number so that we know what it is that we're going to be spending. So this year, the cap for us was about $540 million. And so you say, well, we had 540. A lot of that's to pay off debt service. When we were created, we inherited $10 billion worth of liabilities. And we've retired all but 1.4 of it. And we did that. We leveraged our 700 million to sell bonds and pledge that money to pay them off. But as we go more and more, every year we're able to pay more in cash than from bonds. So there's going to come a time where we won't be borrowing and we'll be just paying it all in cash.
Kind of like paying it forward.
Yes.
The way, in the perfect world, the way you'd want it to be.
And if I could add something,
sure,
with the current project we had the feasibility study, which was very much the same thing. We had to appropriate the $500,000 for the study, but MSBA is reimbursing that, and it's been this ongoing reimbursement. So regardless of whether the project moves forward or not, that reimbursement still takes place, which I think some taxpayers didn't know that, but that's true as well.
Yeah, you're absolutely
And it's been a terrific process, because I've lived through both. The one where we had the Hanson Middle School project, and we had to do all of the paperwork after the fact, which was huge. I remember it filling an entire room, where this way the pay-as-you-go is far superior.
Yeah, and we do, you mentioned the feasibility study, and that's another thing that's way different than what used to happen in the future. I mean, one of the problems with the old way was exactly what you said. You had to come up with paperwork after the fact. So we make districts do a lot up front. And some people, when they first, especially if they've done the old project, they say, oh, you guys are a pain, you're making us do all these things, go through these hurdles, jump these hoops. But after the project, they say, thank God you made us do that.
It's so much better.
You made us ask a lot of questions at the beginning. I mean, the feasibility study, we don't come into a project with a preconceived notion of what the solution is. We come and say, what's the problems? What are the problems that you're having? You're having a leaky roof, it's overcrowding, there's some safety issues, whatever it is. And so you come to us with your problems. That's when you fill out that statement of interest.
Sure.
And then we invite you into our pipeline, and the first thing we have you do is get an owner's project manager and a designer and go through a very rigorous feasibility study. And you study the current conditions, you study what a renovation would do, you study what just to bring it up to code would do, and then you study what a new building might do, an addition with a renovation. So we make you do a lot of studying. And so then you say, well, how do you come up with what the project's going to be? And the dollars really tell you what the project's going to be. If an addition renovation is way less expensive than a new building, well, that's what we'll do. But if it's close, we definitely would go to a new building. And, this had some unique issues because we were deciding we were bringing two schools together.
Correct.
And so we actually did a lot more studying at the beginning and to come up with the proposed solution.
Well, that was going to be my next question.
I'm clairvoyant.
I can see that. I can see that. How did you come up with the project for this the scope of the project for this? And you were pretty much, we went through the funding source and we came up with where your funding was. And then you just mentioned that there were several different options looked at.
Oh, absolutely.
Whether it be the complete reno, a reno and an add, an addition
Yep.
with a renovation, keeping one building, tearing one down. It wasn't just this was our preferred, the building committee's preferred design. It was a giant look at from MSBA. Am I right or wrong?
Yeah, no, that's absolutely correct. And we've told districts who come in and they try to ignore the facts of the feasibility study and they want to do A, but the feasibility study suggests B is the right answer. Then we'll go with B, and we'll try to make them go with B. And we've had instances where they were so adamant that they didn't want to go with B that we said, okay, you can go with A, but we're only going to pay you our share of what B would cost. So we're serious about looking at that feasibility study and following what the facts show us.
Speaking on a feasibility study, as you know, and again, like I said, with the expertise that you have on the board, we have had some questions about whether the reno would cost more than building the school, and how do you determine that factor? In other words, the question comes up, well, it would be cheaper to reno both schools than it would be to just tear them down and put up a brand new building. We've had that question asked, and people say, well, how do you determine that?
Do you remember what I don't remember the dollars.
Well, it was the square footage.
Yeah, right.
And so, we make both the designer and the owner's project manager do separate cost estimates of all of these things. And so, because we don't want to rely on just one, we want to have a double check. And so that's what we did in this case. Again, we had the other circumstance of, look, I'm bringing two schools together, so there's some cost savings on administration and probably transportation and other things that all factor into the total equation of what's the appropriate decision.
There's also been several questions about the composition of a building committee on our end. Can you explain a little bit about what we have to do as a town to come up with a building committee?
Sure.
And why we have to put a diversification, because there's always questions, and this would be a question if, as a taxpayer, if I wasn't in the loop, so to speak, and didn't know, why would you have principals? Why would you have superintendents? Why would you have a director of education? Because they all bring into a piece to the pie, but can you explain why that composition happens that way?
The simple answer is I have a regulation, and it lays out the type of people that have to be on that school building committee. But, the common sense answer for me is I'm building a school. So I want education people involved in it. I want the people that are going to teach in it. I want the people that are going to have to run the building. For me personally, I'm a little different because I'm not an educator, but one of the key guys for me is the building facilities guy, because he's going to have to live with that. So I want the head of the facilities guy on that committee as well. But the reg lays out the type of people you need on that. And if you don't do that, then you're violating my regs if you don't have those people on there.
One of the concerns was, well, you've got people who are non-residents on your building committee. Well, they don't care if the taxes go up. So I think it was very important to understand that this is a regulation from the state to you as executive director saying this is who is on the building committee, and it needs to be a balanced group of people who bring a number of perspectives.
And it's part of my job, quite frankly, to make sure you don't overspend.
Yeah,
because,
absolutely.
As I said, we have a cap. I have a limited number, and I have a lot of need. I mean, we had over 200 statement of interest that came in last year.
Wow, that's a lot.
That's a lot.
And this year we have 227. We had 201, 227. And I'm only able to do 50 accelerated repair projects and 16 core projects. So that means I'm saying no to 2/3 of the people that are asking for help. And so it's very important to me that I get the biggest bang for my buck.
All right, seeing as you brought that up, the no question, what happens if it's no? What happens with the reimbursement? Can we go into that a little bit?
Sure. We'll still reimburse you for the feasibility study, the funds that you've expended. But we have to then say, I'm sorry, Whitman-Hanson, but we're going to have to ask you we're going to throw you out of our pipeline, to be just emphatic. And so you'll go back out into the abyss and have to file a statement of interest sometime to come back. And there's no guarantee that, the first year you file a statement of interest again, that you get back into our pipeline. Because every year we start all over again. And this is by statute. This is nothing we concocted. Every year we start again. So I couldn't tell you when you'd get back in because I don't know who you're competing against. But you'd be, I need to use the money that I'm holding for you for a project that's ready to go.
Mm-hmm.
So in layman's term, the money goes away. It goes to if Hanson doesn't accept the reimbursement on this project, it's going away to another community somewhere in this Commonwealth. Because as you said, you have 220 statements of interest a year, and 2/3 of them
I'm saying no.
You're saying no to. So there are a lot of projects, and you mentioned the accelerated projects, and that's been a question from some of the citizens, and I'd like them to hear what you have to say. They say, well, it's been brought up to the committee. You can just stop this and start a new statement of interest, and you're automatically back in.
No, you're not automatically back in. That's exactly the point I'm trying to make. So this year, we're going to do about 25 accelerated repair projects. I have 119 people looking for those 25.
So it's about 25%,
yeah,
roughly, maybe even 22% or 21%. So you're not automatically back in because it's been stated that we could put some of the projects on the remodeling of Indian Head or McQuon School on the accelerated list, and you're automatically back in, and the money is just there.
No, that's factually incorrect.
So it's not. Another question that it seems to come up at times, how do the reimbursements, in other words, how do you judge how much a school gets for reimbursement? Because when we did Whitman-Hanson, the reimbursement was higher.
Yeah, so in the old program, the reimbursements went all the way up to 90%, depending on some economic factors. I'm not familiar with the old,
I understand
formula.
The old formula, sure.
Right now the maximum is 80%. And you start off with 31%, and then there's certain economic factors that get entered in, and it's a formula that's in my statute. There's no wiggle room for me. The information comes in from Department of Revenue, and then some population information from DESE goes in the formula, and your base rate spits out. And I think your base rate was about 56%.
That's correct. Yeah.
You were getting 2 more incentive points because you were going to make an energy efficient building, and I think you got about 1.5 for maintenance.
We got 1 for the good care that we've taken of our schools and our
1.46.
facilities.
Yeah, it was more than 1. It was like 1. I thought it was 1.54, but
yeah. Well, we were
very pleased.
We're on the same plane.
Very pleased to get that.
And not everybody gets that, and that's a good point, Doctor.
It's an excellent point.
You get that because you've demonstrated that you take care of your buildings. And that's important to us because if we're spending money on a new project for you, we want to make sure you're going to take care of it. And you guys have demonstrated that you do.
Well, it's because part of the problem is, I would assume the state wants to make sure that they get, and again in layman's terms, a good bang for their buck.
Yeah, absolutely.
They want to make sure that the state dollars are not getting wasted by communities and they're not going to take care of the buildings.
And I think that's evident now when you look at Whitman-Hanson Regional High School, built in 2005, and it still looks like a new building. And we do take good care of our buildings, and I think having that reinforced by MSBA was very important to the school district.
Yeah, and I just want to say this because I wanted to do this. So one of the things that you guys can be most proud of is the high school that you built, the Whitman-Hanson Regional High School, because that's our model. That's a model school. We only have, I think, 4 model high schools, but by far, this is the one that the other districts choose as their model. And I live in a town that was the first one to choose it as a model, and we're open 3 years now, and it still looks beautiful.
It's a terrific model.
So if you shepherd this project as well as you shepherded that, the people in Whitman-Hanson should be very happy.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when you talk about the reimbursements and the shepherding of how we do buildings and how you look at your projects, it wraps it all into the equation of this wasn't a decision made overnight.
Oh, no.
This was a decision that a lot of qualified people in the buildings trade, in the economic part of it, in all of these trades came forward to come up with this solution, so to speak.
I mean, besides the folks that I talked about on my board, and Richard Bertman, who's the architect on our board, he's a rock star architect. He's built half of the city of Boston. It's CBT Architects for those who know. But on my staff alone, I have architects, I have engineers, I have construction experts. So, of the 65 people that we employ, most of them have come to us from the construction field and not the education field. We rely on the local experts for the education part of it. We build buildings, and the educators know how they want to deliver their curriculum. They work with the architect to share their vision of the curriculum, and then the architect designs to the education plan, and it all works out nicely.
So when you're doing a model school, it's obviously you're doing it to keep the cost down.
Yep.
And to get the best educational bang for your dollar by having all these people on the board. Now, when you go to the process, let's say the school, because this is another question that comes up frequently. Let's say the school gets voted and you move into the building process. As to the point, before the point of the building getting okayed by the town, there has never been any contractors picked, selected, or even a bid process put out. You also, because we have an owner's project manager, as you said, we required right from the get-go, and we also have to have an architect. Then we go to a bid process, correct?
Correct.
And this is not somewhere where the MSBA steps out. You are still watching the selection process as we move forward. Can you touch on that a little?
We're like a bad penny. We stay with you the whole project, and then we'll stay with you for another 10 months after the project is complete and you're in the building. Because one of the things that we decided was important was commissioning. That's proving out all of the systems, making sure your roof doesn't leak, your windows don't leak, that your boilers work, your air conditioning, your heating. And we pay 100% of the commissioning, and we'll stay with you throughout a whole, to get all the seasons to make sure that they all work. But yeah, we're right there with you when you're putting your things out to bid. Even when you're deciding whether to go, traditional design, bid, build, or the new way of that some people like to do is construction manager at risk. We're there to
CMR.
Yeah,
I remember hearing that many times.
Yeah, we're here to offer our expertise, and so yeah, we stay with you because you're spending half of our money.
Yeah,
So
at least
it's
half.
Well, at 59% in this case, point something.
Yeah.
So yeah, we like to keep an eye on where our money goes.
Another subject that comes up quite frequently when we're talking about the building of the school, they say, well, if the state's reimbursing 59%, that would mean the town is in for 41% to come to a total of 100%. If we're building a $58 million project, why is the state only putting up $29 million?
Sure, there are some costs that we cap. We do an 8% site cap, and
right.
my guess is that's probably most of the ineligible costs.
That's correct.
And
it is.
And
yeah.
That's really a protection for the rest of the state. We don't want people to choose really costly sites if we were going to pick up all of the site costs. So it's a way of minimizing our risk, quite frankly. But it's because we have to look globally at the whole state.
Certainly.
But I'm pretty sure all of your ineligibles are just site costs. So you're not putting anything.
Septic was another one.
Yeah, well, that's part of
that's all
site
part of
costs.
that, right? Exactly.
So it's nothing that you're doing that's lavish or anything that we're penalizing you for.
That's important
It's just
to
what
bring that
it's
up.
just what our regs
Absolutely.
say.
Yeah.
And that's again, that's one of the reasons why people love the Whitman-Hanson as a model, because the finishings and all of the things that they put in there was so reasonable, so inexpensive, but will last forever.
Right, and it looks terrific.
Yeah.
People are often surprised as I take them on tours to see how this was done to look as great as it does and come in,
The first time
with the budget.
First
right.
time I looked at that school, I still am the school counsel for Norwood High School. Yeah. And I walked in, and that cut stone, which is a very inexpensive, I thought it looked like marble.
Yeah, it does.
I walked in, I said, oh, this is too rich for us. And then I walked in with somebody in the business, and they
show
said,
you what you're looking at.
said, no, that's a very smart way of doing that, because it'll hold up forever, but it looks really cool.
And I think that's the same point with trying to build a new elementary school. I mean, we have people who are shocked that a new school costs as much as it does, but that's the going rate. That's what things cost these days.
And you don't get to do a lot of these. That building, Whitman-Hanson is going to last you 50 plus years.
Absolutely.
It has to. And
right.
so you want to do it right, and you don't want to cut corners and make it cheap. I mean, look at all the buildings, all the schools that were built in the 70s, and that's what happened. And those buildings are in far worse shape than some of the ones built in the 1920s, because people were cutting corners then.
Well, I don't think there was the oversight that you have at this
definitely not.
particular time. Oh. I'd like to talk a little bit, and this possibly could be something that is a little bit ahead of MSBA, but I don't believe so. When you talk about the cost, people say, well, you're building a new building, there could be cost overruns. Are there more cost overruns on remodeling versus building new? Yeah. For the predictability.
Anecdotally, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but yeah, Well, we usually put more contingency in for renovations too, so and it gets spent. Fortunately, we haven't had many cost overruns either way because
That's good.
we do. Our process is such that there are very few surprises, but the chances of having more surprises are in a renovation because you don't necessarily know what's behind that wall when you pull it down, and there's certainly a far greater risk of overruns in a renovation than in new construction, where the only really unknown things could be when you start breaking up the soil of what could be buried under there.
Mm-hmm.
So the predictability is much greater on building new than there is on renovation. And obviously you must see, and I'm asking you this question, when you do a new versus a remodel, you have an educational value that is much greater, I would assume.
Well, yeah, you do, because it's easier to, like, technology is way easier to put in a new building than in an old building, because the older buildings just didn't contemplate the type of technology that we need. There's no runs for all of the things to make it wireless. It's kind of funny you're putting wires in to make it wireless, but you do.
You do. Yeah. You definitely do.
And so it's much harder to upgrade for technology and safety issues than it is building new. It's just far easier.
Well, I would assume the safety factors in a new building are taken into effect much different than if you were trying to do a renovation.
Yes.
Because you're working with something that you have to work around, versus when you're putting a new building up, you have that predictability of saying Whitman-Hanson did this, we're going to follow this model over here, this is what did work, this is what didn't work. Whereas when you're remodeling an old building, you have...
You got to make it fit.
Yeah, you've got to make that fit.
And you have to find a place to put your students, too,
right,
when you're doing that as well.
Yeah.
Well, it's been quite a rapid half hour, and we're moving to a close, and it's good to see that MSBA is completely on top of their projects, and you've answered a lot of questions, and I know that the citizens of the town, when they view the show, are going to appreciate the fact that a lot of the things that they were getting from the building committee, you're confirming are going on. Whether it becomes checking on who the owner's project manager is, keeping a close eye on who the building construction people are, auditing the whole thing all the way through, and then sticking around for a year to make sure the 4 seasons of all of our seasons work in going through this. It's a very important process, so I'm very happy that you came forward to tell us all of this, and I've been involved in, this is my second project now, and I think it's great that the state is getting involved with schools. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm delighted that Ruth was here today with us, and that the executive director of MSBA was here with us. But as we end all the shows, if you have anything that you would like to see on Bring It On, you can contact me at bobh4433@aol.com, or you can call my cell phone at 617-538-0189. And as always, stay tuned. We will be back.